views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren, Jaime, and today we're going to update you on what's happening in and around our borough, as well as across New York City. Coming up on today's show, we'll talk about teachers who are actually pushing for remote learning. We'll speak with attorney and host of today's verdict, David Lesch, on what legal criteria can be expected. Also, we'll learn how one charter school is continuing with its music, dance, and arts classes through the COVID-19 pandemic. And then later, we'll speak with the founder and executive director of StriveHigher Incorporated on how they're providing educational experiences to underserved students. And then finally, we're going to learn how local not-for-profits are coming together to help serve the Bronx during the COVID-19 crisis. So stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. And hello, everyone, and welcome to Open. I am Daren, Jaime, and we are glad to have you sharing with us. Today is Wednesday, September 16th. And yes, you're watching Open, a live program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to your TV set. We also want to welcome our viewers on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, as Open is broadcast live simultaneously on the MNN channel. You can also feel free to stay connected to us here on all of our social media platforms, as well at BronxNet TV. Well, a lot has certainly been going on in our borough and across the city throughout the course of the past week. We're going to take you through a couple of things with our Bronx updates. We start in state news. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo has announced that restaurants will now reopen for indoor capacity dining with a limit of 25% capacity. The state will reassess the guidelines by November the 1st and could increase capacity to 50% if the city also will reassess indoor dining if the positive rate reaches above 2%. Governor Cuomo outlined the safety standards, which are the temperature checks for all customers at the door, no bar seating, as well as masks being worn at all times while not at tables, and then enhanced air filtration and circulation, as well as midnight closing times. The standards also require restaurants to get contact information from at least one person at the table. This will go to the city's Test and Trace program. Well, in other news, New York State Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie and Emblem Health held a back to school and food give back giveaway. It's an event in Eastchester Heights, assisting families impacted by the economic strain due to COVID-19. Our BronxNet reporter Arlene Makoko was on the scene, and she brings us those details right now.
It's that time of year again for Joshua Lawson.
It's important for us going to school so we have more supplies and we don't get short on supplies.
The 9-year-old, now with a brand new backpack, just one of 250 donated by New York State Assemblymember Carl Heastie and Emblem Health, now feels ready for the new school year ahead. And it wasn't just backpacks bringing smiles of appreciation.
He's been doing a lot for the seniors. He's been doing a lot for the youth. And now because everything is closed down, he's trying to hold the community together.
With the tent set up here on Seymour Avenue in Eastchester Heights, 500 boxes filled with groceries were being handed out to help ease the burden of families coping with the impact of COVID-19, like that of Gloria George's.
For me personally, it's been very stressful. My daughter is in the medical field. So I take care of my two grandsons. So it's stressful for both of us. And now with school going back, we really don't know what's going to happen with that. So This is refreshing.
And that's what leaders here want to hear.
During this pandemic, we all have to be one big happy family. We all have to take care of each other, and just want to make sure that for here in my assembly district that I'm trying to do what I can to make sure that people in the community have what they need.
For Emblem Health, it's also about making sure nutritious food is provided.
As a health plan serving New York City and the greater area, we know that school supplies are on demand, so we're here today in the Bronx, partnering with Speaker Hastings to make sure that kids have school supplies, backpacks, food, and fresh vegetables.
Again, it's 500 boxes of food and 250 backpacks. What that means is that everyone is starting the school year in the right way. For BronxNet, this is Arlene Makoko.
And thank you, Arlene. In other news, the Joseph Abood brand, in partnership with Senator Alexandria Biaggi, distributed 2,000 meals at Montefiore Mount Vernon Hospital and Project Bravo Food Pantry as part of the brand's national COVID-19 relief initiative. Our BronxNet reporter, Cody Anyuke, has the story.
New York State Senator Alexandria Biaggi and national menswear brand Joseph Abood partnered this summer to deliver 2,000 meals at Montefiore Mount Vernon Hospital and Project Bravo Food Pantry. Effie Zenkin, COO of WHP Global, discusses the importance of the brand's mission to support essential workers during COVID-19.
Certainly companies that are of a national scale, the way Joseph Abood is, the way our platform WHP Global is, because we own a couple of brands under the platform, have a responsibility to step up during those times of need.
Zinkin explains the brand's meal donation initiative for essential workers.
We had started this where we were giving 10,000 meals across the country, and we did something in Robert Wood Johnson in Jersey City, and we did something in the Cleveland Clinic. And so, but then we also wanted to do something that was very close to home.
In a press release, Senator Biaggi gave thanks to Mount Vernon essential healthcare workers and the partnership that has developed between WHP Global and the Joseph Abood brand. Zinkin touches upon the lasting resilience the Bronx has had during the COVID-19 pandemic and the inspiration that carries.
Not only one that has been tested over time, that resiliency, and always bounces back, but it's also the heart and soul of New York.
To learn more about the Joseph Abood brand and their COVID-19 relief efforts, visit www.josephabood.com. You can also follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Reporting for BronxNet, Cody Anyuke.
And thank you, Cody. And that's all the time we have for our Bronx updates. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Open returns right after this.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from And welcome back. New York City teachers and unions are fighting to keep schools closed and teachers at home nationwide. Teachers are nervous about getting back into the classroom, citing health and safety concerns as the COVID-19 pandemic stretches into a new school year on September the 1st. A new lawsuit was filed suing the country's largest school district to give every teacher the right to work remotely if they choose. But what legal criteria can be met in order to ensure the safety of educators and students for this upcoming school year? Joining us now to share a little bit more and provide some further insight is the attorney and host of today's verdict, my brother and friend, David Lesch. And good to have you, David.
Daren, always great to see you. You know, as an attorney, you usually don't see too many new issues that come up. It can be a little exciting, at least for me, whether there's issues about vaccination or issues about school and standard of care. Certainly, this one is a new one. It's basically 5 teachers who are really heading a class action in New York City, bringing in action, forcing New York City to justify why they have to go to work and why they can't work remotely. And they're basically, these 5 teachers who are leading the litigation are arguing in the lawsuit. This is really a Hobson's choice. In other words, if we don't go into school and we lose our job as a teacher, then we can't feed our families and there's an economic hardship. If we do go into school and we teach the class, there is a potential for harm to our physical bodies, and therefore somebody in our family could have, you know, dire consequences and unfortunately pass away. So we lose either way. The only way we can win is if we're able to stay at home and teach remotely. However, the City of New York Board of Education says, well, you do not meet the CNC guidelines for the ability to work from home. Therefore, you must still go in. Teachers say, hey, we have to take public transportation. That in itself is a risk. We don't know, you know, the type of setting that we're going into. We don't know exactly how it's being sanitized. We haven't been given enough information. So we believe that we've been put at harm. And that's why we are bringing this lawsuit to either to force you to allow us to work remotely, or in the alternative, if we are harmed as a result of going in, there's going to be some type of damages, could be, you know, just a regular civil lawsuit, and that may end up having to go before a jury, which, you know, I'll talk to you in a second about, I think, the elements and things that you would have to prove. Again, it's all new and particularly fascinating for anybody in my field.
Yeah, but when we talk about teachers actually filing this, you said there's a few more expected to actually join in and get this kind of momentum. Let's talk about threshold, because when we remember, the governor put several thresholds out there, particularly for nursing homes, houses of worship, places like that, and increased those thresholds so high. What are we going to see legally when it comes to teachers as well as schools?
Well, you know, again, it's political, as it always is, and that's why, you know, rolled into the bill, you know, in Congress, in terms of trying to get the extra money for those who are on unemployment, is, you know, liability protections for hospitals, nursing homes, and of course schools, which Democrats don't necessarily want to, you know, to give as well, because they want to be able to hold certain institutions responsible if they aren't at least meeting certain, as you said, certain thresholds, certain criteria. So think about it from, you know, the Department of Education standpoint here. You know, well, you know, what more can we do? You know, we're doing all the protections we can, and, you know, children have to be able to go to school. That's the only way they can learn. They're our future. You know, we need you in school to protect them. The teachers are like, wait a second. You know, what about, you know, courthouses? There's no foot traffic in courthouses. That's not particularly fair. You know, you're protecting judges and you're protecting lawyers, but you're not protecting teachers. Well, it's really, you know, that's really not particularly fair to our class. Our class are teachers, and more are going to join the class. So you're going to say, well, what's the threshold here? Well, let's say this lawsuit ends up going to trial for whatever reason, or at least there's litigated on papers. Well, you have to show so many different things. First of all, there's the burden of proof. How much, the standard of care. Think about that. What's, you know, as an attorney, you're always arguing, well, they did not meet their standard of care, whether it's an automobile accident or a ceiling collapse. What's the standard of care that has to be provided to you? Well, what's the standard of care that the Board of Education, the City of New York, has to provide? What's the level that they have to provide in terms of distancing, cleaning? Nobody knows, because nobody really knows exactly how much care they have to provide to you. The scientific evidence isn't there yet. We didn't know what the standard of care to give in terms of nursing home residents. And then, Governor Cuomo is giving a lot of heat now in terms of transferring to the nursing homes. But at the time, we didn't know what the standard of care. Do we really know what the standard of care is now with respect to teachers? We don't. So that can change. Once you get to trial, that can completely change the standard of care. And then there's well, what's the burden of proof? Is it negligence? Is it gross negligence? Is it reckless? What's the standard as an attorney? The standard, the burden of proof, how far do you have to go? Usually it's by the preponderance of the evidence. That's like 50-50, that you have to prove that they did something wrong. Well, maybe now it's clear and convincing evidence that they did something wrong. That would be about 60%. So all of these things in flux. So it's very easy to file a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit, but there's so many things that are not settled yet. And that's all the different elements that go into the lawsuit, the burden of proof, standard of care, what a jury hears in terms of the threshold, as you had said. Is it by a preponderance of the evidence, a clear and convincing of the evidence? Is it that the city is negligent, or is the city reckless? What do you have to prove? And by the way, is there going to be an immunity, Daren? There could be an immunity here for school districts. And we're not just talking about the schools of the city of New York. What about the private schools? What about the Catholic schools? All the different schools throughout New York State? It's all unsettled. So, again, it's just a strange time. It really is.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about another topic of discussion. We talk about legalities. Let's talk about the vaccine. We hear that the vaccine is making its way, and hopefully it will land in the lives of people pretty soon. But still, there's some legal concerns with regards to the vaccine. If a person is actually hurt, let's talk about that. Say, for instance, the vaccine does, there's going to be some legal ramifications with that too. So walk us through what you're hearing right now, because even though we're hearing about the vaccine, let's talk about some of the legal ramifications, because we know that's also in part why it takes so long for it to come across the desk.
The vaccination law has been around since, from my research shows, back in almost in 1905. It's been around for a long time, when our country was trying to force people to be vaccinated against smallpox. A lot of people didn't want to take the vaccine, and some people said that it actually harmed them when they took the vaccine. And the courts were a little wishy-washy as to what to do about it. But that particular area of the law has been growing. People do get hurt by vaccines. It is a fact. Now, it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. It could be how the vaccine is administered, where the needle is put into the body, or the actual vaccination itself, whether it's harmful to you. There are attorneys who specialize in this. So the question is going to be, well, what is going to be the standard of care here? Is it that you were negligent in terms of the creation of the vaccination? Were you grossly negligent? We've been watching the news. I'm sure, you see it as well. They stopped one of the trials because a woman apparently developed some type of issue with respect to an inflammation in her spinal cord. Well, if this vaccine went to market and now many people end up having this same, issue to their back, well, is that reckless now? Gross negligence? You had noticed that this happened to one woman and maybe in other people too, and you still let it go on the market? Again, issues we're not sure about yet. Burden of proof, what's it going to be? Will there be a blanket immunity? And this is very interesting, because this now, Daren, this relates to the schools. What if next year they say you can't put your child in class unless you show that the child was vaccinated? And the parent says, I don't trust the vaccination. The Board of Education says, well, that's fine, but we're not offering remote learning anymore. We expect children to come in. If you don't get vaccinated, your child's not vaccinated, you can't get an education. Well, I'm sure there'll be a lawsuit for that. So the question is, so does the vaccination hurt you? Can you sue for that? And if you don't get vaccinated, can you sue because you're prevented from getting some of the, some of the benefits that society gives you, like an education? All still unsettled. And, this is, again, a whole legal area that I'm sure we'll be discussing for at least a year, if not years to come.
Yeah. In our remaining couple of minutes, let me just get here and talk about what's going on in regards to the court system. We know the court has remained open, but when we talk about jury trials, that is not actually taking place yet. So give us an update as to how things are transpiring in the court system right now.
Sure. Well, I'll give you the scoop. It looks like, from what I hear from the Bar Association and the people that are in the know, there will not be any attorneys returning to certainly Bronx County Court till at least January. That's a given. So let's say once the attorneys go back, which should happen right around that time, well, what about jury trials? I mean, that's really, what the next step. That will be even longer. Maybe the summer, if there's a vaccination, because to ask jurors to cram together in a jury box, it's a very difficult thing to do, especially on a civil case as opposed to a criminal case where you really are determining a person's right to freedom. So with respect to a civil case, I don't see jurors until at least the summer. Attorneys, they should start getting ready by January. That's from what I hear. But in the meantime, and I've told you this off camera, I'm very busy in my office. I have depositions all week long, virtual conferences with the court. I'm still meeting clients in my office, when I can. But foot traffic in the courthouse, not yet. Although judges do have to be in, clerks as well, at least a certain amount of them, but no lawyers yet. I don't see that happening until January. So this whole remote learning for attorneys, it's going to continue.
All right, DL, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much. Listen, best wishes, stay safe. And of course, as these issues continue to come before us, we'll bring you back so that way you can hash it out for us. David Lesch, our guest. Thanks much.
It's always my pleasure. Stay healthy, stay well, stay Bronx strong.
You too, DL. Stay Bronx strong. Listen, we've got more show here on Open. If you want to find out more about David Lesch, visit him on Twitter at David Lesch. Stay with us. We got more show. Open continues right after this.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash your hands frequently, learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
And thank you for staying with us. Schools across New York City have officially started their first week since the beginning of COVID-19. Bronx Charter School for the Arts is a public elementary and middle school founded on the principle of a rich and vibrant background in the arts. It's also a key catalyst for the academic and social success of all students. Bronx Charter School for the Arts announced it'll be opening the 2020-2021 school year between a full-day hybrid model and then a remote model. What initiatives are actually being taken to ensure students are safe and educated in their return? Well, we're pleased to be joined by the Executive Director of Bronx Arts, Miriam Raka. And Miriam, good to have you.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be with you.
God. Well, you're trying to navigate this situation as well as all, New Yorkers, but I think all eyes are really on the school system right now, trying to determine how things are going to work out. But give us how it's going so far.
Well, so far, so good. I think the most important thing that we understand is the need for flexibility. We had planned on opening our hybrid model on the 9th of September, and for various reasons, which we'll get into, we decided to delay the hybrid until October 5th. And so we began remote last week, and it's been going really, really well.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about reopening, I think a lot of people were really having a lot of concerns about whether or not it was going to be safe to reopen. And I know that schools and the whole educational system had to go through an overhaul just like everybody else to really get ready. What were some of the challenges you faced going towards reopening?
Oh my goodness. There were so many. Making sure that we had the appropriate PPE for our students and our staff. Understanding what families wanted and needed. I think I should say that first, right? Like making sure that we weren't coming up with a plan that parents would then say, I'm not doing that. So we really had to be in constant communication with our families to make sure that whatever we put together was going to be something that would work for them. Then trying to figure out how we would pod children so that, we understood that from the CDC guidance, it was really best practice to have kids in small groups so that if there was a case of COVID, we could shut down a pod and not have to shut down a whole school. So we had to figure that out and understand how that would affect the way we educate kids. And then our buildings and understanding what the needs were for our buildings, one of which our elementary school is in a private space and our middle school is in a DOE space. So then understanding, the difference between what we could do from a private space and then what we needed to do as we were part of the DOE in terms of space. So those were some of the challenges.
You hit on something pretty key when you talked about you wanted to get the feedback from parents, because I think they, of course, were the ones who were really raising their voices about concerns as to whether or not they would see their child in a hybrid environment or whether it was going to be full, remote learning. What were some of the things that you were hearing from them? Because, we've heard some concerns, but what were you hearing as an educator from your concern?
Well, Yeah, so we surveyed our parents several times, and it was sort of split in terms of who felt that they could have their kids in the building and who really felt that they needed to keep their kids at home. And then we sort of found over time that was shifting a bit and more parents wanted to keep their kids at home. And I think a lot of that had to do with cases mounting elsewhere, right, outside of New York, because New York's cases have been relatively low, but the media really focused on how throughout the country rates were really high. So if you're focusing on Texas or Florida, it'll scare you in terms of whether or not we could come to school. So those are some of the concerns. Not understanding, or not believing that children would actually keep their masks on during the day. Not really feeling that we could, not sort of understanding how it would work for kids to be in little pods and would they be in those pods all the time. And so just not really being comfortable with this new way of doing school, I think is what it sort of amounts to.
Yeah. When you talk about music, dance, and the arts, I mean, those are staples in a lot of schools. But when you talk about doing it virtually, with already the present challenges that exist, how are you able to navigate those programs, the music and, the dance and the arts? What's that looking like?
Yeah, that's been actually one of the things that surprised us the most was how powerful those courses could be remotely. And I'll say that even when we get to the point where we have a hybrid model, those teachers will continue to be remote because they're the ones that have to go through the whole school, right? So if every child gets music, that teacher is going to be going through all of, interacting with each student. And that doesn't really work in a COVID moment. So, but some of the things that we've done, they do have their classes remotely. We stuck to the same schedules for the most part. Music classes have been the most beneficial in being remote because we could do one-on-one, like they've had individual music classes in the middle school for sure, where the teachers have really been able to do one-on-one instruction with kids, which has been tremendous. And then in the elementary school, they've had classes where they had their instruments, mostly recorders. So one of the things we did when we shut the school in March is we instantly gave kids laptops and their musical instruments. And then later on, we decided we needed to send them artistic supplies. So we sent those out to kids. We've had arts happening regularly, visual arts. We've brought in speakers. A lot of performers from Broadway who weren't working came online and talked to our kids about what their lives were like. What was it like to be on Broadway? What was it like to be a professional dancer? So we've had more engagement with the community than we would normally. Mm-hmm. And we actually had a performance that we taped of Fame Junior because our middle school kids were going to do a musical. Both schools do musicals, but the middle school musical was scheduled for June. And so we did a virtual event where people got to see the kids actually performing in their homes. And it was wonderful. It was really powerful. So, we've been flexible.
I think flexibility is the order of the day, right? When we talk about dealing with this, we've got to navigate the flexibility and understanding, hey, anything could happen. We've got to make these adjustments here. We've got to make these adjustments there. But as it stands right now, presently, walk us through how you anticipate probably getting us through up until the end of the year.
As of October 5th, we will be bringing roughly, we hoped between 10 and 30% of our kids will actually come back to the building. And we prioritized our younger grades, so kindergartners who've never been in school, wanting them to benefit from being in the building in person with their teachers, and then the younger grades, so kindergarten first, maybe second grade. And then our kids who are special education, children who have IEPs and need some additional learning supports, we prioritized having them in the building. We also prioritized our sixth graders who are new to us as well. So looking at those prioritization that we did, those will be the kids who will come in, and they'll have the very same schedule if they're in home or if they're in the building, they'll follow the same schedule, 8 to 3:30. And in the middle school particularly, all learning will happen through the computer. So whether or not I'm in the building or I'm at home, I'm going to have the same teacher teaching me through the virtual means. And that was important to make sure that we had the same level of instruction happening no matter where a child was. We didn't want it to be that if you either were home, you were getting different instruction, or if you were in the building, you were getting different instruction. So, and some of the elementary school classes are doing that as well.
So as we talk about going forward, we know that he talked about being adjusting and making flexibilities and having those things in place. What is your hope at the end in terms of having students in the classroom during a time such as this? Because you said that's important. So before we wrap up, I just want you to share a little bit about the importance that you feel of having actually the students in the classroom and what that actually means.
It means everything. I mean, when we started this, we developed our sort of guiding principles for distance learning. And the number one thing is obviously safety, but the number two thing for us has always been relationships. That's how we're able to educate our kids. And that's what's really special about Bronx Arts, is that kids feel known and cared for in that environment so that they can do what we need them to do academically. And so I worry tremendously about the kids that we're not going to get in the building for the rest of the school year maybe. And we're always trying to figure out ways to engage them even though they're remote. So our middle school teachers and principal have been going to kids' homes and doing it with masks and socially distanced, but just saying, hey, here's a book, here's a uniform, we care about you, I want you to see my face, and we'll see you online. I worry so much for kids, especially in the sort of social economic environment that our kids are in. They cannot afford to have a lost year of learning. And so that's absolutely not acceptable for us. Yeah. Getting them in the building is, it's what we hope for.
Yeah. Well, Miriam, you're doing a great job. And so far, I know that you guys are tasked with a lot, but you're doing well so far. Best wishes for this upcoming school year.
Thank you so much, Daren. I look forward to checking back in with you in a few months.
Absolutely. We definitely want to know how things are going. All right.
My pleasure.
All righty. Well, listen, we want you to stay with us. We do have more open coming up next. And coming up, we're going to take you to another very special guest. Now, if you want to find out more information about Miriam and her school, don't forget to go to bronxarts.net. More open will return right after this.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
And welcome back. StriveHigher is a not-for-profit providing educational experiences and teaching life skills to underserved students in K through 12th grade. Their mission? to help students develop into well-rounded individuals through education, financial literacy, wellness, and career exploration. Here to share more is the founder and executive director of StriveHigher Incorporated, Olga Baez. And Olga, good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, I was glad to have you. When we talk about, where we are today, certainly I know StriveHigher is pushing students. And talk to us because, as you said, you got students between grades K to 12. And some of the things that you guys do are really trying to push them in the area of also financial literacy and wellness. So give us about where this all came from.
Sure. I wanted to start an organization that was able to provide students with different experiential learning opportunities. And I truly believe that students need they need to learn different things throughout life through their development in order for them to reach their full potential. And we all know the importance of financial literacy. But I think financial literacy needs to start at an earlier age. So that's why we started doing story times surrounding the topic of money management. We have done visits to Bank of America, TD Bank, for a workshop for students so that they can learn more about the financial literacy aspect when it comes to banking, checking accounts, and savings accounts as well.
And so when we talk about your teaching and training, obviously like most places now, you've had to adapt to go to a virtual environment. How's that been working for you now that you're on the virtual side?
Sure. It's definitely been a challenge just because, Zoom has definitely tired people out. Everything is on Zoom. There's a lot going on social media through Instagram Lives, and there are a lot of options, which is, it's great. But I think it can also be overwhelming for both students and parents. So we've been trying to do a couple of sessions of live Instagram story times. And one time we also had a career panels. We invited different individuals from different career paths to share their advice. And we did that through Instagram Live as well.
And so one of the components that you really have in terms of dealing with students is that about life skills and really helping them to develop life skills. Talk to us about why you felt that was an important track to go forward with.
We no longer have home ec. A lot of students don't have that class where they can learn how to cook, when they can learn how to sew a button. And those skills are important throughout our lives, and especially when students go off to college and they need to learn how to do their laundry, mail a letter. I know that's something that's uncommon for a lot of our younger students now, or this generation. They don't really know how to mail a check or write out a check. So those are all important life skills that are still part of our society and that students need to learn. We had about a year ago, we had a sewing class where kids learn the basics of sewing. They created a small pillow, and it's just to start instilling an idea in their minds of these are the skills that you're going to need as you continue to grow up and develop into an adult.
Yeah. Well, being at home, you got to learn and you've got to take advantage of this virtual environment. Give me some tips, if you will, because when you talk about learning at home, everybody is not always proficient at learning virtually, learning at home, but give me a little bit about that home learning space.
It's a new path that we're not used to. We were thrust into it back in March, and now we're trying to make some sense out of it. My advice to parents would be to create a specific space in your household for your students' learning opportunities, for their remote learning. It's important for them to just have a space where they can concentrate, make sure it's a space where no one is able to walk behind them. I think that's something that we discussed during our learning spaces session during our Instagram Live, that one of the moms shared, that it's something that people don't usually think about. But you want to make sure that the space behind you, it's not one where people are always walking by, because then that's going to distract not only your student, but also the students who are watching the class remotely.
Yeah. And so as you're teaching kids about how to do it virtually, obviously, a lot of people are making the transition. Some are doing it easy. Some are having a lot of challenges. What are you hearing about right now in this time and space about those who are trying to make that transition? What are some of the biggest obstacles that you're hearing about?
Students being online in front of a computer for long periods of time. I think that's one of the most challenging aspects of remote learning. Students are not accustomed to that. For a very long time, we have been managing students' screen time, and now that has gone out the window, right? Because we're telling them you need to be in class in front of a computer or your laptop for several hours. And it sounds like students are not obtaining breaks throughout the day as much as they should. Especially for the younger kids, it's tough for them to sit in front of a computer, to be engaged. And kids are little and they're antsy and they want to move around, and there are a lot of rules in terms of what students can do and cannot do. And obviously that's for everyone's concentration purposes, right? You want to make sure that students are not eating, whether in front of the camera, because then that's going to get other kids hungry. But at the same time, students are used to having snacks throughout the day, especially now transitioning from the summer vacation to being back in school. It's a challenge.
Yeah. What's it been like for you?
I have a teenage daughter, so we'll see how it goes. But that's definitely a blessing that she's older and she's able to log in by herself, and I'm more managing her schedule. I know for other parents who have more than one child, that's definitely a challenge as well. How do you manage 3 different remote classrooms, for example, while also trying to work from home?
One thing I failed to mention about StriveHigher is also you do have a scholarship fund, I understand. So give us a little bit about the scholarship fund and who's eligible to participate.
Yeah, so this would be our 3rd year that we have provided a scholarship for 2 Bronx college students. They're usually students who are either part of our program or they have volunteered with our program. And the funding comes from family members, friends, and Strive supporters who believe in the importance of supporting students at the college level as well. There's a big push for students to go to college, and that's an important push, but we also need to provide students with support while they're in college to ensure that any obstacles that they may have, such as book expenses, that's covered and that they're supported so that they can actually graduate from college.
And so for people who want to get connected, how do you go about getting connected with you?
Yeah, they can follow us on our Instagram page or Facebook page, StriveHigher Inc. We currently have a virtual reading buddy program that's also taking place. At this moment, the program is full. We actually have over 40 students who have registered for that program. But we have many other opportunities coming up. So we are always posting resources and sharing information about other opportunities, not only from our organization, but also other local nonprofits.
Awesome. And I want you to know that when you talk about taking kids and giving them life skills, it's one of the most important components I think that we have forgotten about. I mean, the math and the algebra and all that's great, but sometimes the life skills is the most important thing that you can get. So Olga, you get the final word about StriveHigher.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, just please follow us, StriveHigher Inc., Instagram or Facebook. We are excited to share our programs and everything that we have to offer to our communities. We want to help everyone excel, and we know that working together, we make a greater impact.
All right, Olga Baez, our guest here on our guest on Open, I should say, talking about StriveHigher. Olga, good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope everyone has a great academic year.
Well, thank you, Olga, and all the great work that you're doing with StriveHigher. Wishing a best year for both students as well as teachers. Listen, we've got more Open coming up. Stay with us. We'll return right after this. And thank you for staying with us. The Bronx Private Industry Council has been working with Partners for Rap for Bronx, World Central Kitchen, and the Bronx community relief efforts to provide more than 1.8 million prepared meals to the community, up to 1,800 grocery bags per week to families, and more than 29,000 pounds of fresh produce to homes and community partners. The Thinkubator is continuing their work tackling the issue of food insecurity within our community. And joining us now to share a little bit more is the Thinkubator's Assistant Director of Internships and Special Projects, Sharon Wellington-deAnda, also lead facilitator and manager of Youth Voice, Julian Joyner, and also the internship student, Naomi Okunrobo. And thank you so much for being with us all.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we talk about the borough of the Bronx, we talk about New York City, you know, food insecurity is huge, but you guys are really doing a great job of getting food out there and really trying to fill the gaps. So Sharon, a little bit about the work that you're doing.
Well, we started the work basically in response to COVID-19. And COVID-19 uncovered a lot of the food insecurity that was in the Bronx and actually made it worsened. It worsened with the epidemic. And basically, Judy Diamond and the Diamond Foundation, James and Judy Diamond Foundation, basically reached out to our organization and asked us with the Bronx Community Relief Effort to sort of spearhead relief efforts and coming up and working with individuals like Michael Blake and different organizations and restaurants, organizations like Rap for the Bronx, Rachel Chalop Powers, Shani McCormick, World Central Kitchen. We basically started a program of working with grassroots community-based organizations and serving our community. That was our mission. Both me and Julian worked really hard in coordinating those efforts. We reached quite a few people. We worked with over, I think it was over 70 different community-based organizations, and we served hundreds.
And Julian, talk to us about facilitating, because I know you're the lead facilitator, bringing things together. Talk about the work that you did in terms of, you know, that partnership with people.
Sure. You know, so people were essential to us really coalescing this. And I think that Sharon touched upon, you know, a really great point. You know, in speaking with Judy and helping and having her help us coalesce exactly what it is that we needed to do. One, we knew that there was an immediate need for food that needed to be addressed. So there were folks in the Bronx, you know, some of whom were in our own community. Sharon and I are both from the Bronx, so we had, you know, an innate desire to be able to help folks of our own community who were, you know, right here in our own backyard. We wanted to be able to support the most vulnerable first, you know, so folks who were elderly, folks who were disabled, who weren't able to go out and get meals, which was really the impetus of us, you know, coordinating all of these different deliveries that we had through World Central Kitchen and Rap for the Bronx. Another thing that we really wanted to do was to be able to, you know, support the local businesses that had already been associated with the Bronx Private Industry Council. You know, so prior to COVID, we had a coalition of about, you know, 37 different members of, you know, small businesses who were really impacted by and continue to be impacted by COVID. You know, so one of the things that we really wanted to do was to be able to, you know, speak to those small business owners, help support them, and make sure that they were able to, you know, retain their employees and meet the needs of the people in the community.
And Naomi, you had the opportunity to serve as an intern in your internship. Talk about what you learned this year through your internship.
Yeah, during the summer, I worked with the Thinkubator and Rap for Bronx, and I kind of worked behind the scenes, kind of doing some office work. But through that, I was able to have like a bigger picture of food insecurity in the Bronx, like working with Shayna and working with Rap for Bronx. We went to a community garden, La Finca del Sur, at the end. So it's like seeing how urban gardening and urban farming really impacted the community was nice to see at the end. And we talked about like helping the community, helping get produce through urban gardening and farming. So yeah, that's what I learned. And it was a really great experience.
Yeah. And so what are we looking at when we talk about food insecurity? I know that it was already big prior to COVID, but Sharon, give us a little bit more about what has been post-COVID for people now, because we've got more people unemployed, more families are really struggling in terms of trying to make ends meet. So the situation has gotten more desperate.
It has, with more people unable to unable to basically buy fresh food, basically care for their families. There are a lot more individuals, actually whole families, who are now suffering. One of the things that Naomi learned through working with our program, and she sort of wrote this into a really great paper, I really want to highlight her paper, is the food deserts. There are the lack of produce found in the Bronx in supermarkets, and how that affects health and nutrition is only exacerbated when you have something like a pandemic like COVID that now cuts off food supplies. And you have people not being able to afford fresh produce, fresh fruit, all the things that are essential to the well-being of our community. So our response and working with, especially Rap for the Bronx, was able to basically through a network of a number of different organizations, was able to literally pack grocery bags of fresh produce, fresh fruits, and able to distribute those things, and then working to incorporate that into our educational programs and the offerings that we're having for summer as well as fall. Basically, it was something that we considered, transformative education, because we were educating ourselves, we were learning as we were going, and we were really learning as we were going. None of us had ever dealt with a pandemic before. I have 20 years of case management, academic advisement skills, so I'm able to do a lot of operational and work, but I never dealt with the need and the abject need. One of the places we had the most impact was with Bronx Works Food Pantry. They have Grand Concourse. Julie Spitz and I worked. I mean, we've worked so well together. She's a wonderful woman, and she has been running that food pantry literally for years. The food pantry, the first week of COVID, in April 4th, April 4th, that week, we noted that she served over 200 individuals. By the following week, she served over 500. And it just kept growing, and it's still growing. People are coming from different places so that they're able to feed their families. So the work that we're doing, and we no longer do that work. We're sort of focusing on our programs, but even in focusing on our programs, we are impacting food security. We're impacting the programs that we work with. Julian is currently working with World Central Kitchen, still making sure hot meals are being served to the Bronx community, because that's still a need. We have people who are still, due to actually contracting COVID, not being able to go out to shop for groceries, not being able to cook. They need to be helped and assisted. And we want to make sure, one of the great things I did learn, and we all sort of felt, the amount of community that we actually felt in the Bronx, because it was literally the Bronx community that rose up to help. And even though we're all parts of different organizations, we all have an attachment to the Bronx. So that was really cool.
And Julian, let me bring you in here, talking about your work with World Central Kitchen, and also the things about education and advocacy, right? Because it still needs to go on. People still need to be educated and informed. Give us a little bit about your work with World Central Kitchen, and then also the work of advocacy.
Sure, I'd love to. So the work that we did with World Central Kitchen, like Sharon said, really started in early April. And I just want to highlight that was Sharon's first month, and she really was able to jump in there and be a big champion for this work. So back in April, we were able to start phase 2 of the World Central Kitchen food program. So with that, in partnership with Michael Blake, some other folks who had previously been involved in this work, we were able to really coalesce a team of folks. And so our operation, we dispersed hot meals to different community-based organizations in the Bronx. Like I said before, we really wanted to have a focus on folks who were most in critical need. So making sure that we were feeding senior citizens, making sure that we were feeding students as well, because the youth are a huge component of the work that we do. We want to be able to ensure that, when students are looking for opportunities, that they can look right here in their own backyard in the Bronx. And we're huge proponents of, students being able to have these different opportunities here. In working with World Central Kitchen, one of the things that came out of that in terms of actually meeting the needs of the students was this really great partnership that we had, as part of the Bronx community relief effort. We teamed up with Mott Haven Bar and Grill, a couple of well-known chefs. So Chef Kwame of Top Chef fame, and then Chef Andy, who was formerly of Suyo. They volunteered their time. They reached out and said, hey, we're working chefs. We really want to be able to make a difference here in the Bronx. How can we help out? And one of the things that we were able to do was coalesce colleges in the Bronx. So Hostos, Lehman, BCC, and we were able to have a food drive for college students because many of them were at home. Many of them didn't necessarily have access to jobs, which were impacted by COVID. And being that youth are our focus, we really wanted to be able to have a meaningful way to be able to meet their needs. And then also, show them what was available.
Naomi, I'm gonna end this segment talking to you real quick, talking about youth. Talk to us about what you learned through your experience in terms of you wrote a paper, you were able to communicate to others your experience. If you could share with us what that experience was like.
Yeah, of course. My experience at Rapper Bronx was very interesting. I got to learn more about urban gardening and urban farming, about food insecurity in the Bronx. I worked behind the scenes, kind of doing office work, but I still did some research on it while doing the internship, and it did inspire me to write my paper on it. It was actually for my AP environmental science class, you have to talk about, devise a plan on how to overcome a certain environmental injustice in your neighborhood. So I decided to talk about food deserts and food swamps. And I feel like the way to really capture what we really want to do and how to overcome it is to see how it really impacts the Bronx, which is through racism and low-income neighborhoods. So food deserts and food swamps are directly a product of racism and redlining in the Bronx and in many other places. So I wanted to make that connection early in my paper. And later on, I talked about 3-step system on how to overcome it. So the first step is to really get into urban farming and urban gardening and bring the community together to grow produce. And my second plan was to bring that produce to bodegas and farmers markets, because bodegas are more common than supermarkets. You see bodegas on every corner and they don't really serve healthy food. So I feel like bringing the produce from the urban farms to the bodegas will really make a big impact and make people have healthy diets. And the last step is encouragement, because this can go all down the drain if we don't encourage Bronx residents to use the produce. So I feel like we can make pamphlets, urban farms can make cooking lessons to encourage people to actually use the produce and incorporate it into their diets. So that's what I really learned through Rapper Bronx in my internship, and I like to put everything into my paper.
Well, no, well done, well done. I think everything that you said is actually what we call in the hood facts. Thank you so much, Naomi, Julian, Sharon. Thank you for being with us here on Open.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
No worries. No, listen, and we want to let you know if you want more information about them, all you got to do is visit their website at thinkubator.org. Once again, the thinkubator.org. Well, we've come to the end of our show today. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us, and most of all, you, the viewer, for tuning in. And if you missed any part of our show, you can always catch the Recablecast on Bronx's Channel 67. If you have Verizon Files, that would be Channel 2133. Or don't forget, anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. If you're looking for a brand new episode of Open, check out my girl, Rita Valentine. She's coming back on Friday with a brand new episode of Open. But until then, keep your hearts, your minds, and most of all, this channel wide open. Daren Jaime saying take care and God bless.